live in areas where the virus might spread during warm months. Rob Reynolds, Al Jazeera.
Now, the Communist Party chief of Vietnam is a step closer to being elected to the new Politburo, which will rule for the next 5 years. 1,500 delegates are meeting behind closed doors in Hanoi. They're voting on who will be Communist Party General Secretary, Prime Minister and President. Nguyen Phu Trong is expected to retain the powerful top job of General Secretary, despite reports of an earlier challenge by Prime Minister Nguyen Thanh Dong. Whoever wins will help determine Vietnam's relations with key partners such as the United States and China. Vietnam is one of the world's last remaining communist countries where the 94 million people have no direct role in choosing their leaders. Live to Scott Heidler, who's in Hanoi for us. Scott, so the new leadership is to be announced on Thursday. What are the first challenges they will face as they lead Vietnam for the next 5 years?
One of the main challenges is going to maintain this amazing economic growth that Vietnam has seen over the last couple of years. It's a very dim economy around the world, but here has been a bright spot. So that is going to be something that the new leadership is going to have to focus on maintaining this. That goes along with further reforms. And then also you've got a territory dispute with China. It's a very delicate issue here. It has been handled differently by different leadership, but it's maintaining a presence with this territory dispute is something that they're going to have to do. And then lastly, what they're also going to have to do, this new leadership here in Vietnam, and that is maintain and develop relationships as this nation becomes more geopolitically important.
Following 2,000 years of Confucianism in Vietnam, historical roots shared with its neighbor to the north run deep. But the relationship with China has become increasingly unsteady the last few years. Anh Chien Lung has been a tour guide in the capital for 15 years. Dedicated to Confucius, the Temple of Literature is a frequent stop for visitors. But in 2014, Anh's company suffered a 75% fall in Chinese tourist traffic because of the territorial dispute in the South China Sea involving China, Vietnam, and other countries.
For the Chinese people, it depends on each year. It depends on the relationship between the government. And you also know that recently, the relationship between China and Southeast Asia, it changed a lot.
As a result of the souring relationship, Vietnam has been embracing America's pivot to Asia. 40 years after the war with the U.S. ended, the relationship with its former enemy has never been better. The U.S.-fronted Trans-Pacific Trade Agreement is in the final stages before being signed. It'll remove tariffs, making trade between the members easier and cheaper. Vietnam, which is one of 12 nations in the pact, is positioned to hugely benefit economically. The agreement could also loosen Vietnamese ties with China.
The relationship, economic relations between Vietnam and China is over dependence. But we do hope that with TPP in place, and Vietnam will have more and deeper relationship.
That partnership can now include American military equipment. The U.S. government lifted its ban on weapon sales to Vietnam 2 years ago.
In the dim global economy, Vietnam is glowing. It's one of the fastest growing economies in the world, and that, along with TPP coming online soon, industries like apparel and textiles here are looking to take off.
For every 1 billion of U.S. textile and apparel export, will create about 100,000 jobs. Export of textile and apparel from Vietnam will, exceed 40 billion by 2020.
That's 1.5 million more Vietnamese employed in the textile and apparel industry alone. So as the Communist Party chooses its leadership for the next 5 years, the younger generation hopes growth and good fortune in Vietnam continue.
And Scott, when we look at the future of this younger generation, Vietnam's youth, are we going to see changes there, you think?
Well, Folly, I think what is very important is, as we heard, that gentleman say, who runs one of the largest textile companies here in Vietnam, that the growth that he's expecting, particularly because of this new trade pact that'll be coming online, but also the growth that it's had, that it's expanding, 100,000 jobs for every additional $1 billion in exports and expected to grow considerably. So for the youth of this nation, they are focused on more jobs and more opportunities. So if we continue to see this growth, obviously that's going to give them more opportunities for for jobs in different professions. But I think what needs to be focused on as well is the continued reform so no doors close and only other doors open outside of the textile industry. That is the gem of what's going to be happening over the next couple of years through that trade agreement. But the young people of this nation, they want more opportunities, and they want them as quickly as they've been getting them over the last couple of years, Folly.
Scott, thank you very much for that. Scott Heidler reporting there live from Hanoi. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry is urging China to take more of a stand against North Korea. He's meeting his Chinese counterpart right